Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
We can meet our destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show, only on Revolution Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Jim White and Jason Van Tatenhove.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
Please hang up and try again.
Dave, are you there?
I'm here. It is I.
Welcome back to the show, Dave. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. That's a quick entry. I'm doing good. I'm just driving along Highway 60 going into Phoenix and getting prepared to do some necessary administrative work for my work. But I thought I would drop in and say hello, and we could talk about Jade Helm and other sort of events.
Well, Dave, most people know who you are, but let me give you a quick intro. Joining us on the line here is our great friend Dave Hodges, been on the show numerous times, co-hosted, I believe, at least once or twice. He has his own radio program called The Common Sense Show, and he also has a companion website of the same name. I think you moved your broadcast time now down to like 5 p.m. or something, haven't you, Dave? Didn't you change your time slot a little bit? And
yes.
that's on Sunday still, correct?
Right. It's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. We go for 3 hours.
Excellent. So, Dave, thanks so much for joining us. I was just getting ready to read. An email, a comment that was put on one of my videos earlier. I'm going to just read it in its entirety, and then you let me know what you think about this. It says, watch a few of the last Pete Santelli videos. Peter Thiel and the Pantier Corporation is getting ready to round up the vets during Operation Jade Helm 15. The positive military is saying that there are 1.2 million foreign troops on U.S. soil right now to do it. These Walmarts are Trojan horses for the job. I think they're going to try to take Texas. The same guy that's running Yemen is running Jade Helm 15. SOCOM. What do you think about that comment? How right on you think that is, or is that a little propaganda?
You know, Pete is right a whole lot more than he's ever wrong, and his batting average is way up there. And he had experience working in the continuity of government program, so he knows the right questions to ask. And I actually put part of this video that was embedded inside another video on my article today, and what he showed was insider footage of what appears to be a gas chamber inside a closed Walmart. I kid you not. I looked at this, and I sent it out to experts I know that understand these kinds of things, and we all came to the same conclusion. This looks authentic. So let's start with that as a starting point when we evaluate what Pete was saying. And I think his notion here has merit. Now, is Texas going to be taken over? You know, down the road, it could be. I don't think that's going to be a precipitating event, because that would set off a civil war like yesterday. But I do think it's very possible. I mean, under Jade Helm, they have declared the state to be a hostile state. We know that most of the Jade Helm activities are going to focus on Texas. So that is a real possibility. I would just hesitate to say this is going to happen soon. With regard to the other things that he said, that they're going to round up the veterans, if I were to say that right now myself, because I don't know what evidence Pete offered in support of that, because I've not seen that claim from him, but I would have to say right now, if I said that, I would say I think it's possible, but I lack the proof to substantiate it, and I'm not sure what Pete offered. So on that one, I'll have to say I'm not sure.
What about the 1.2 million foreign troops on U.S. soil? Do you think there's that many on U.S. soil?
Boy, that's the $64 million question. How many are here? Back in 2013, between the months of July and October, FEMA and DHS ran a drill in FEMA Region 3 that involved 385,000 foreign troops. It's hard to get a real estimate on the numbers. That's the one real number I can put my finger on. Now, the bilateral agreement between FEMA and the Russian Foreign Ministry in 2011 called for the bringing in of 15,000 Russian troops to help the United States with disaster training preparation. Like we don't have a National Guard. We know that's all bogus. So aside from those two numbers, guys, I'm not aware of any other numbers that substantiate an aggregate total. Now, do I think the 1.1 million or 1.2 million is reasonable? Yes, I do. We know that with Jade Helm forces in Michigan, I've heard from Army reservists in Michigan, they've trained with the Danes, they've trained with the Russians, they've trained with the Turks. I had a report that there were 36,000 Turks that came into the country, and this report was later substantiated and reported in other places. So, is it a million? I don't know, guys, but would it surprise me? No, but let's put it this way. There's enough of them here that it can cause a significant problem for our veterans. And we already know the veterans are targeted. And on that point, Pete is right on the mark, because under the MIAC report, veterans are among the first people listed that are considered to be domestic terrorists, not for what they've done wrong or any views they've expressed, just because they're veterans. So that point, Pete and I are in complete harmony on.
Well, Dave, how about on your own? Without, we read that story, that comment from one of my videos. How about from your independent research? What do you see going on with Jade Helm? Are we still, do we need to get on the streets like Paul Revere and ride through the town and cry that they're coming? Or is this just a Alex Jones? I'm not sure if you saw Jakari Jackson put out that video, and the human, what's it called, Jade Helm, Mastering the Human Domain. That human domain thing apparently is a military operation. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. And I think Alex's report is right on the money. But we're dealing with metaphors and labels and symbols in Alex's report. And it's needed work, because what it does do is it exposes an agenda. So Alex and his staff are to be commended for exposing the agenda through their tireless work there. What I like to take it to is the streets. I want to get down to the bottom line on Jade Helm. But let me tell you what the bottom line on Jade Helm is. And guys, I'm going to give you a disclaimer, too. And this may surprise you. I've said this over a dozen times in print. I don't know that Jade Helm's going to go live. And people are probably sitting back who are familiar with my work and doing a double take, unless you've already read that. I have written that many times. But it will be Jade Helm's successor, or its second generation or third generation successor. It might be Jade Helm 18. I don't know when it's going to go live. But I will tell you this. The events that Jade Helm are practicing for, which are gun confiscations, civilian dissident political extractions, martial law, they're going to do this someday, because they would not be spending this kind of time, material, and resources practicing this if they weren't going to enforce it. But you mentioned a very salient point when you said, should we ride through the streets like Paul Revere? What a great metaphor that is, because that's exactly what we need to be doing. Well, then we get to use the airwaves and our websites to do that. Here's what we need to be concerned about. Most of the country right now, I'd say 90% of the country, is still largely oblivious as to the dangers that Jade Helm could potentially hold, or Jade Helm's successor. People need to be prepared. Jade Helm will have a less of an effect on a drastic scale if people were prepared. If people converted a lot of their cash into gold. If people would get their money out of the bank. When you notice I've been writing about this again lately. If people would have arms, ammunition, sufficient food and water to hold out for a couple of years. If people would do that, Jade Helm could be negated in many respects, because at the end of the day, the way that Jade Helm or its successor will control the American people is to create artificial scarcity of food, and water. And here, if you want to eat, if you want something to drink, and you don't want your kids to starve to death, come to our friendly neighborhood camp. And that's where they've got us. So we're doing the work right now on your show, The Liberty Brothers, and on my show, The Common Sense Show, and all the other good shows out there, like John B. Wells, Doug Hagman, etc. We're doing the good work because if we can get people to prepare, the Jade Helm folks don't have enough foreign troops or domestic American troops who will go along with this nefarious agenda to enslave the entire country. And what I think will ultimately happen, and this is a really unpopular statement, it makes people extremely angry and they want to kill the messenger rather than deal with the message. But if I were to put my crystal ball up on the wall and I'd say, okay, mirror, mirror on the wall, what's likely to happen among them all? What I would say is that we're going to have a civil war. And I believe American troops will join with the people in large part. And I believe that this civil war will go on for decades. And there's a lot of evidence to support what I'm saying. I don't want a generation or longer civil war. I don't want to live in a Vietnam and have no interest in that. But guys, I see the writing on the wall. The powers that be are fully committed to completely and absolutely subjugate this country, commit depopulation, go for a war of unification, which is another endeavor for depopulation, and they could care less about our welfare. We are commodities, or we are wasted energy that needs to be disposed of. That's how they view us. We're not human beings. We're not their comrades or their friends. They want 90% of us dead, and this is exactly what they say in their literature. And this is why we need to view Jade Helm as a threat, a direct threat to every individual's life.
Now, Dave, I wanted to bring up a couple different subjects and get your thoughts on them, and they kind of all tie in together. First off, we're seeing in California the water situation go dire very quickly. I'm getting reports from my contacts that people that are in 3%ers and whatnot, that people are going to buy 200 to 400 more gallons of water and containers to store it in. But it is reported that in Yuba City, Fresno, Modesto, Chico, Bakersfield, and 5 other big cities will be completely out of water within a month or two. And that Mountain House, which is part of Tracy, California, is out of water as of now. And, officials are scrambling to ship water to them. How does that play in? I mean, obviously, this week alone, I've seen egg prices jump from what would normally be $3 to $4 to over $9. Chicken prices are going up. Water is obviously going to go up. How does that tie in everything? I mean, again, I think especially the water thing with the weather manipulation and some of the stuff that Deborah Tavares talks about with the aquifers, the deep aquifers, that's a created situation as well. Is that part of the depopulation?
Let me start with an anecdote. Back in 2009, my family was vacationing in San Diego area, up in Oceanside. And we were down on the beach, and there were 2 tables that had petitions on the same thing, but they had opposite positions. And I signed the one petition, which basically said they wanted to negate the first position. And the first position said that human beings would not be allowed on the beach between the months of May through November. And so I had been into this for about a year. I've been doing my show for about a year, and I think I was at RBN for about 6 months. So I used this as an opportunity to jump right in and do a little dialogue. And what they told me, when they got frustrated with this, one guy got very frustrated with me because I basically was giving him the libertarian view. Who are you to tell us where we can go, what we can do, and limit our freedoms? And he said, what I'm telling you is mild compared to what's coming. He said, when the elite, who rightfully run this planet get their way, there'll be no one on any coastline in the world. It will be virgin territory protected by Agenda 21. And that to me was a very telling statement. These people want California to be vacated. They're good, and basically, and I'll tell you the reason I also know this too. I published an article where I showed military vehicles in Quartzsite. I didn't know what they were doing there, except I assumed it was more Jade Helm activity. I found out the day after I published the article on pictures that they were there practicing to receive refugees from I-10 out of California. And this is the goal. The goal is to get everybody out. I had Deborah Tavares on my show this Sunday night, and she's an expert on the water situation in California, and she's going to give an in-depth report. And in my conversation I had with Deborah yesterday, what she shared with me was we're seeing deliberate weather modification by HARP. They're creating the drought artificially. And guys, I can add to this too. When I grew up in Colorado back in the 70s, we used to do cloud seeding. If the snow season didn't start in time, there wasn't enough aggregate snowfall, it would cost the state millions of dollars. So they go up there with the planes and they do cloud seeding and they bring on snow. Why aren't they doing cloud seeding in California? You get the snow in the mountains and you get the runoff from the water. There's no reason why they're not doing something like this, except for the fact that this is part of the plan. This is a deliberate attempt to depopulate California and to run the people out of there. So how does this fit into Jade Helm? Well, Jade Helm probably has Jade Helm parts A through triple Z, if you follow my logic. Right. And anything that's going on now that could involve military, police force, legislation, ties in somehow to Jade Helm because it's that massive. Their tentacles are everywhere. What I suspect is going on without a smoking gun document is that the Southwest as a whole are eventually going to be depopulated. And what we're going to see is the birth of Opslon. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with this concept, but Opslon is the notion being put forth by groups like MECHA in this country at various universities, various think tank groups, right, in which they want to see the old Aztec Empire resurrected in this 7-state area as an independent country. And if you look at the map, and I wrote an article about this, if you look at the map of Jade Helm, the original 7-state map of Jade Helm, and compare it to Opslon, it's identical. There's no deviation whatsoever. So this is the ultimate goal. This is the breaking up of the United States as a sovereign country.
Now, the other piece of the puzzle that I wanted to touch on as well is we have some very big things happening with Russia as well with the military buildup. And we've actually got threats happening. Russia threatened Monday to boost forces on the borders of NATO states and position tactical Iskander missiles in the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea. And we're talking about doing a buildup of tanks, artillery, and other heavy equipment in the bordering states.
Right.
And I don't think we've seen rhetoric quite like this since the Cold War. With the planned civil war, would that be? How do you think it'll go down? Do you think it'll be the civil war first, and then using Russia, China to kind of get everybody under that new world order, that world war that's coming?
At one time I was saying this, and I said this consistently for 2.5 years, you would have a series of precipitating false flag events necessitating martial law, and martial law would come into play, and you'd eliminate all resistance. There was also the existence, simultaneously to my belief, Executive Order 13603, which in part calls for 2 conscriptions of United States citizens. One of them is specifically for the military, and the second one is a civilian conscript program run by the Department of Labor, in which they admit that they'll call these people consultants, not pay them, and that's slave labor by definition. Now, to bring this into the Russian sphere and the Russian conflict with the United States, it's clear that Russia, China, and the BRIC nations will fight the United States and whatever is left of NATO by that time. So the scenario is false flags, martial law, World War III. And those conscription programs will basically eliminate most of the possible dissent. The thing, though, that throws the monkey wrench into this plan for the globalists is this, is that if we can muster enough resistance to Jade Helm and people are prepared and less vulnerable to the powers that be that will control our food and water, they're going to have a hard time conscripting Americans. They're going to have a very, very, very hard time with this. And that actually could delay World War III. Or it could cause World War III to start with America with its pants down. And I hope that you're ready for my next statement, because this is scary. This would not surprise me if this wasn't the end goal predicted by the globalists. And here's why I say this. We have a traitor at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He's given away 7 strategic oil-filled islands that could be used to invade Alaska. He suspended the F-22 flights over Alaska, didn't replace them with the F-16s or the F-35. He has greatly reduced the submarine patrols along the coast of Alaska. He's told us by his actions where the Soviet, and I call him Soviet because that's what it'll end up being, the Russian portal of entry will be, in part, will come in through Alaska. Also, we see a buildup of Russian allies in our hemisphere with 12 countries. Some of them are now aligned with the BRIC nations, and Russians have troops, planes, and ships in these countries. We are seeing a massive preparation for Russia and China to attack the United States. And I could go on and give example after example how Obama has gutted our defenses, our nuclear weapon systems has been greatly gutted because they have replaced these decades-long leaders who were thrown out because they said they wouldn't fire on American citizens, and they've been replaced in part by women who know nothing about nuclear energy or nuclear weapons. We are being set up to get our backside kicked badly, and it's the president that's doing it. So when we look at scenarios that are going to follow, and I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but there's a lot of variables to this.
Oh no,
You're good.
That's why we have you on. We want the details, please.
Okay, well, you got martial law after a false flag event in World War III, but I think that they'll start World War III even if we're in a civil war, simply because of the fact that America is supposed to lose this war, and America will disappear as a nation from the earth. And if you go into biblical prophecy, America's not around in the final days. Pretty much everyone I know agrees with that point.
Yeah, I've heard similar things from people I respect as well. Dave, ABC reported just today, this was sort of breaking news here, 11 o'clock Eastern time. So it was about, 5 or 6 hours ago. Exclusive. FBI in midst of broad campaign to disrupt ISIS, sources say. And my speaker just fell off my table here. And it also says
I didn't catch that last part.
Okay, it says right here that exclusive. FBI in midst of broad campaign to disrupt ISIS. It says here also a little further down, hundreds of investigations are underway in all 50 states. Many involve suspected ISIS supporters, authorities said. What do you think that you think that ties into anything? This investigations in all 50 states for ISIS. You think it ties into Jade Helm at all, Dave?
There's no question it does. The FBI director actually came out with that proclamation, almost a month ago. And I published it hot off the presses. And I actually saw him as doing his job. And I said he hasn't got the memo from Obama. He's not supposed to do his job. Here's how ISIS is going to play into this. It was about 2 months ago now, maybe a little longer, that Judicial Watch came out with irrefutable proof, government documents of the Mexican government, and they had insider sources that told them of an ISIS base camp 3 miles on the other side of the border, 8 miles from the city of El Paso. Subsequently, I published that. Then I had found out there's as many as 4. And I had going back to last summer, I had 2 Border Patrol agents who confided in me repeatedly during the immigration crisis out of Central America, and they tell me there's 4. Well, there was a man down in Texas who ran an investigation along a 47-mile stretch, which included the El Paso sector along the border, and he found that entire region was devoid of Border Patrol troops. So they could come in masse. Also at that time, oh gosh, maybe what was it, 3 weeks ago, guys, that a U.S. helicopter from the Border Patrol was fired on.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks ago.
The media tried to whitewash it, said they don't know if the shots came from outside or inside the country. Well, that was a lie, because there was clear and irrefutable proof that it happened well within inside this country, as much as 15 miles, and they were trying to intercept a convoy headed for a flood of refugees that were going to converge at a road, and they got fired on and had to abandon their mission. They're lucky they weren't hit by an RPG. It was ISIS, guys. Now, here's how ISIS is going to fit into this long term. And I'll go back and I'll preface it by a conversation I had with a Texas Ranger, in which he said that they were preparing for ISIS incursions to take over small towns, assassinate police departments, and I mean departments, not policemen, police departments, kill public officials, and so forth. Now, they're very capable of doing that with the strength they have, and they have very sophisticated weaponry. ISIS will likely come in, and I've gotten this from one of my DEA sources that I reported on last year and used him as a source. He told me that he has very good intel that ISIS will come in after an economic collapse. When we have the chaos of people in the streets, the need for martial law, ISIS will exponentially ramp up the chaos by coming across the border at that time to wreak their havoc. We also have clear evidence, and I published an article on this, that ISIS has or is about to obtain nuclear weapons, and I do mean plural. And I wrote an article on that. If people go to my search engine on thecommonsenseshow.com, they'll see the documentation for this. Now, can I say for sure today ISIS is in possession of nuclear weapons? No, I can't. But what I can say for sure today, you're talking to the people that can make it happen, among them of which the Pakistani government. And this is really well known within ARSOF, Army Special Operations Forces. Some of them who are willing to talk off the record, they're not going to betray their oath. They're the ones who are out there actually saying this. In fact, I had Scott Bennett. I've interviewed him twice, once on my show and once on a station I was subbing for in Colorado. And he was a PSYOPs officer in Special Operations for the Army. And he was telling me that we funded, the CIA funded ISIS. He named the people that controlled the bank accounts, their Swiss bank accounts. He told how the whole operation was set up. And he said they are in the actual endeavor of picking up nuclear weapons from whoever will sell it to them. So ISIS will be a prominent player. See, a riot, we have food riots, and you have water scarcity riots. Those usually burn themselves out after about 30 days, and all kinds of evidence show this. Well, what can make this crisis go on longer than 30 days like the global elite want? ISIS. ISIS will be the whipped cream on top of the pudding.
Well, Dave, it's always so heartening to have you on, for crying out loud, my brother. I mean, you're crying out loud. It's like I talk to you, and it's like, oh man, we're in some trouble. Well,
guys, let me share something with you, okay? Let's change gears just for a second, all right? When I was a college coach, I was one of the first ones to champion the 7 seconds or less approach to playing offensive basketball and the use of the three-point shot. And I was vindicated last night with championship of the Golden State Warriors. And I was greatly gratified to see my friend Alvin Gentry, an assistant coach for the Suns, and Steve Kerr, formerly of the Suns. I knew these guys because my wife had dealings with them when she was running McDonald's here in Arizona. Great guys, great, tremendous human beings, experienced this wonderful success with fast break and three-point shooting basketball. And I've actually got a coaching offer sitting out there right now that I'm looking at. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I'm looking at it. So how's that for good news? Okay, that's kind of lighthearted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. All right. See,
congratulations.
Yes,
It's all a
congratulations.
matter of.
But unfortunately,
And,
Dave, I think we've got to hope for the best, pray for the best, but prepare for the worst. And really, we're looking at
Oh,
the
yeah.
worst days that we've ever seen as a country, even in modern history, I think, if things play out as they could.
There's no question you're right about that.
So
No question at all.
You had a guest on the other day talking about some of the ways in which we can get through this and do it a little bit easier. Can you talk a little bit about that interview? I want to say it was Bob Griswold.
I'm going to refer people to Bob Griswold. He'll talk to you himself. I'll give you a few enumerated items he put out there, but Bob is available at readymaderesources.com. He's got a chat button on his website. His number is listed there. He answers the phone, and you don't have to buy anything. He'll answer your questions. He's a great guy, and he's one of the most knowledgeable guys. What he has talked about, among other people, certainly just the regular, you have to have this kind of food, you have to have water, and you need like a Berkey water filter, and you need night vision goggles because your greatest dangers will come at night. And if your enemy has night vision and you don't, you're in trouble. So he goes through a lot of that. He talks about sanitation requirements, medical kit requirements. He talks about getting like a stapler for stitches and ouch without the anesthetic. His wife is a naturopathic doctor, and I've had her on my show. I've had Roxanne on my show, and she went through all the litany of stuff you can do from a medical standpoint. Because a lot of people just think food and water. Food, water, guns, and ammo, and some gold after the fact, and I'll be okay. But you got to think about surviving medically because you're not going to have your pharmacy. You're not going to have urgent care. There's going to be no one at 911 left to answer the phone. So you got to be self-sufficient. And they go through a lot of the natural cures, how you can actually create your own antibiotics. This stuff is invaluable. And again, shameless production for Bob, but it's not Bob. It's me doing it for him. His website is readymaderesources.com. And for my money, he's really probably the most knowledgeable guy among many that are out there right now. Now, let me just say this, too. If you think you're on the red list, when the economy collapses, that's your warning sign. That's your chest pain that the heart attack's about to happen. If you think you're on a red list, you need to get out right away, and you cannot be around a cell phone. And I want to stress this. A lot of people will know not to take their cell phone, or they have the mistaken belief they can take their cell phone just as long as they take their battery out of it. They think, sorry guys, doesn't work that way. If you're around a cell phone, you're in the same room and you're speaking, those NSA supercomputers are recording your conversation, and if they got the voice prints of the dissidents they're looking to round up through Jade Helm, and they hear your voice, they say they being the computers, automatically have a tag on your position. Automatically. And then, of course, there's all the cameras out there, and you've got facial recognition because you got a driver's license picture. You got to be really careful. You cannot go to a friend. You need to really be at least 3 generations removed from a primary contact if you're going to hide out.
Just need
so
to
if you don't have that network set up, you need to do it right now.
Some backcountry camping, I'm thinking.
Well,
or possibly in town. I don't know.
When Jade Helm 15 or 18 goes live, take your pick. There's going to be a lot of people that die. What I'm telling people is how to increase your odds. And who knows, I might be one of the first casualties, but what I'm telling people, I believe makes sense, and it increases the odds in your favor. If you do nothing and you're red listed, you're going to be targeted. If you're a veteran, you're already targeted. Why? Because you would make a great Viet Cong member. And if we do go into a decades-long civil war, who's going to be the people that help carry this out? Who are going to be the leaders of the resistance army? It's going to be the leaders of the Minutemen, or what we would call veterans.
Well, Dave, I don't know. There's probably a handful of people that actually do know. I don't know if there's 1.2 million troops I don't know if this is a training exercise to see just how many people are going to go along with it, if they're really going to do something live. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know if many people do, but I do know that something seems to be going on that's fairly obvious. But I still have to always, maybe this is naive on my behalf, but I still have to believe there are still many people serving in the current military that would not stand by while foreign troops fired on, Jason and Dave and myself. But maybe I'm looking at it at a completely the wrong perspective. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, there's still a lot of good people in the military, Dave. I think most of them are, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the military, the people in the military are conditioned to follow orders. It's do this, yes sir, no questions asked. Let me start off by talking about something I know to be a fact. Two of my military sources cut their teeth in special operations. Different entities, but still the same mantra. And what concerns them is the fact that they talk to people running Jade Helm. They know the leadership. And the leadership is telling them that they don't know their full operation scope. They're only being told on a need-to-know basis from day to day or week to week what it is that they're going to do. And this greatly concerns them because what they're afraid of is that they're going to be asked to break the law. And they're afraid that they are indeed going to have to do things to American people. And so when will Jade Helm go live? When the troops are in the air on the helicopters and they haven't had time to think about their orders. If you give them time to think, they're going to back out. So do I think there's going to be a Kent State massacre at some point? Yes, I do. Do I think that the troops will have a change of heart and defect? I think the majority of them will. So that's my answer to your question. I think initially we'll see problems with regard to this, but I think pretty quickly the American troops will join the people.
Dave, I've been following the geoengineering stuff quite closely lately, and there's no doubt that they are now aerosolized spraying or chemtrailing on a huge level. Globally, we're documenting it video-wise, or shooting time-lapse stuff. It's just ratcheting up. I've talked to Dane Wigington several times. I actually maintain pretty regular contact with him now. And he seems to think that there will be that they are fighting off a catastrophic event, which could be an extinction level event that there's no doubt we're already seeing a massive chunk of our biosphere go extinct. But he feels that we are, with the methane blooms and whatnot, really on the precipice of something huge. Could Jade Helm be possibly something tied into that, preparing for the possibility that things heat up to the point where they can't hide it anymore? And what are your thoughts on the geoengineering side of things?
Well, you're alluding to a lot of things, and let me just give you a disclaimer here. I'm willing to talk about it, but I'm not willing to talk about it authoritatively because, I don't know. What I have said up to this point, I'm 99% sure of everything I've already stated on the show today. Now, I'm stepping into an unknown territory. And there are two things out there looming, and possibly three, that we should probably look at and say, could this be an issue? And I've looked carefully, and I've written about one of them. One of them is Operation Bluebeam. And Operation Bluebeam is a simulated alien invasion designed to get the people to let their guard down to accept a planetary new world order when the invasion is actually fake. The invasion will culminate in the destruction of religions, and eventually, in one of the scenarios that even my father was aware of, the end game scenario will be, the new United Nations, Gaia religion will come out of this. Is it possible? Yeah, they have the technology. They've got the holographic technology. Steve Quayle and I've talked about this. They create battlefields right in front of you, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't real. So can they do that? Yes. Would putting troops in the street be an answer to this? Yeah, because it would help control the people to some degree. So that's possible. But again, Operation Bluebeam has been around since the late 70s. My father was aware of it in his work with captured German scientists that he worked with in reverse engineering a lot of their technology. And he and I have discussed it, and he said he thought it was an end game plan when all else would fail. And I think he's probably right. Now, he said that over 30 years ago. The other thing that people are looking at, and I'm having Bob Fletcher on, I think the first Sunday in July, to talk about Planet X. I don't know about Planet X. I really don't. But the stories and rumors are so persistent, they're pervasive on the internet. And there's some really good people like Bob Fletcher who totally subscribe to this. So I've got to open my mind up and be willing to look at it. I've not formed a conclusion. I'm really kind of waiting for Bob. Now, having troops on the street, if you got Planet X passing between the sun and the earth, and it's going to cause these huge planetary disruptions, massive earthquakes and volcanoes, tidal waves, and so forth, I don't see how having troops on the street is going to help very much with that. So to me, Jade Helm would not necessarily tie into this as far as I can see. I could be wrong. So those are the two scenarios that a lot of people are looking at. Anything else that you guys are thinking of in terms of kind of the far out kind of connections, or did I hit those?
Well, Dave, definitely with the Project Bluebeam, we've got the Pope with his leaked documents that hit talking about climate change and whatnot, but he's expected to be talking very shortly about the very real possibility of alien life, and you got to wonder why they're doing that now. So
I wrote about this. I wrote about this within the last week or 10 days, and the Pope is all over the alien issue. They've got their telescope here at Mount Graham in Arizona from the Vatican, and they say they believe in alien life, and in fact, the Pope said he'd baptize Martians if they came. Look, this Pope is a lunatic. He violates every premise of the Catholic religion. To me, I'm a libertarian. I don't care what your sexual preference is. I know what my values are. I don't care what yours are. You got to answer to God. I got to answer to God. But Pope endorses transgenderism, homosexuality.
Dave, we're coming to the end of the first hour, and I want to give you the opportunity. Are you gonna? I know you're running errands. Are you gonna be able to hold over here for a few minutes and into the next hour, or?
I can probably stay about 10 or 15 minutes into the next hour.
Okay, excellent. Why don't you go ahead and give out your website information here before the music starts playing here anytime.
TheCommonSenseShow.com, and our show airs, and you can listen to it on the website. Our show airs from 5 p.m. Pacific to 8 p.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Sunday nights.
All right, folks, stick with us. We'll be back on the other side of the break with Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show.
And its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, and welcome back to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. As always, at the top of hour 2, I want to encourage all of our listeners to do their part to help keep us on the air. Revolution Radio is the largest listener-supported internet radio network out there, and that takes some doing. So we ask, if you love what you get here at Revolution Radio, you got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 2 studios worth, pretty much all year long, of just a very diverse group of hosts and shows. getting all kinds of great information. If you love what you get here at Revolution Radio, please do your part by going to freedomslips.com, click on that donate button, and give what you can. I want to give a shout out to those people listening to us on Red State Talk Radio. And I want to encourage people, if you're listening to us on Revolution Radio, haven't checked out Red State, and vice versa, please check them out. There's a lot of great shows on both networks, and the more we can get the message of truth out there and what's really happening, the better. We're not about ego here. We want to just get the word out. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Lulzbot, maker of the Lulzbot Mini 3D printer, and MSI Tactical. That's msi-tactical.com. Also want to let people know about our new sponsor, our new, affiliate, Stem Cell Works, which is one of the supplements I take, being 41 and fighting young 20-year-olds. It takes some doing. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I can say that after being on this intraoral spray, I just am recovering faster than I should be. And it really does surprise me sometimes I think, wow, I should be so much sorer than I am after having done 3 hours of working out and sparring yesterday or the day before. But you can check it out. It's really works by supercharging your own natural stem cells. And if you check it out, it's 25% off, free shipping, and you get a money-back guarantee. So if you want to check it out, go to Stem Cell Works with an X. That's STEMCELLWORX.com. Let them know you heard about them from the Liberty Brothers radio show. You can put Liberty in the coupon code. If you're calling, just let them know you heard about them on the Liberty Brothers. And they'll give you 25% off, free shipping, and money back if you don't like it. So what do you got to lose? All right, well, we're back with Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show, good friend of our show. I love having Dave on. He's co-hosted here before. And just really the go-to man right now when it comes to Jade Helm 15. And we were talking about the Pope. I think we were getting into the whole homosexual marriage thing, Dave, before the break. I got to say, I do agree. I'm very much a libertarian viewpoint on that as well. What's between you and whoever, that's between you and your maker. So, I got to say I agree with that viewpoint.
Well, I think we were talking too about the Planet X thing, and that was something that's something I've been sort of looking into. And there's a guy named Nick Pope. Dave, you may know Nick Pope or have had him on your show. He was apparently in the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain for many years. He was in charge of all of their UFO files. He came out, and he's a sort of a whistleblower now, and he does speaking engagements, but he says there's absolutely 100% unequivocally no doubt about it. There's some sort of an alien presence or some sort of a UFO presence. And now you have the Pope, of course, we talked about. Aliens are our cousins. We need to welcome them. Something strange is going on here with this whole alien thing, Dave. And I don't know if it's what you said about the Project Bluebeam, or if they're going to there's going to be a crisis. It's going to quote unquote, make us, need a world government, and it's going to be alien invasion. I don't know. What do you think about this whole alien angle that they're trying to play? Is there something to that?
Well, the point I was making with the Pope was I could care less if my neighbor's homosexual or transgender. I'll still deal with the person, treat him with respect. But it's another thing for the Pope to be espousing this. He is totally violating the tenets of the Catholic religion. I've had Catholics come out of their gourd when I say this. Oh, he's not doing that. Well, yeah, he is. There's no question. He's espousing these values. He's a globalist through and through. And they're going to use him. If Bluebeam happens, you watch and see. They're going to use the Pope to control the religious right as much as possible to get them to go along with the agenda. Now, I'm not saying Bluebeam is going to happen, but I think the Pope is a safety valve. And I think Bluebeam, like my father said 32 years ago, I think Bluebeam is definitely a safety valve plan in case all else fails. So I'm just saying we need to take the Pope with a grain of salt. If I was a Catholic, honestly, if I love my priest, I'd stay in my parish. But if you find the things that the Pope stands for aren't, there's a lot of other churches out there that'll have you.
You know, Dave, that's an area that I don't think you talk about very much, but I think is vitally important. I mean, your father was actually an insider. I mean, your father sort of, I mean, he had information about things that were really classified and secret stuff. I mean, I know you have mentioned it before, but I don't think people realize how close you really were to someone that had classified information. Am I accurate on that?
Yes. I had to be careful. The last 2 years that my father was alive, he knew he was terminal, and I used to visit him every night. And he told me a lot of things he was involved in. Most of them were post-military. He was in naval intelligence. He was in charge of rewiring the Combat Information Center on the carrier Roosevelt when it became the first ship to accept nuclear weapons. This was a big deal back in the day. Not a big deal now, but a big deal then. But his most noteworthy work from a security standpoint took place after they early retired him at 19 years and 6 months of service with full benefits, sent him immediately to Martin Marietta in Coal Creek Canyon, which is just outside Wilson, Colorado in the Rocky Mountains. And today that plant is Lockheed Martin. And that's where he helped coordinate projects on, let's say, reverse engineering what Nazi scientists said that they got from, I'm going to probably say this badly, but what they got from aliens. And I asked my dad, I said, do you believe in aliens? And he said, not really. He said, but these Germans do. He said, they're convinced that's where this came from. And then I asked the obvious question, did they have first-person contact? And he said, not to his knowledge. So, but he said the stuff that they were working on was 200 to 300 years ahead of what he estimated that we could do. And he also concluded as early as 1962 that the U.S. government was involved in a secret space program run by the military, and that we had deep space platforms, and on and on and on. Now, people are saying, well, Dave, why are you only talking about this now? You've been broadcasting for a number of years. And I would say that's correct. But as long as my mother was living and she was receiving my father's Navy pension, if I had spoken about what I knew, she could have forfeited that pension. And that's why I had to keep my mouth shut all those years. My mom passed just about 4 years ago, and it's when I started talking about it. Now, privately, you know, I did discuss this with people like Jim Mars. The late Bill Pollock, formerly of the CIA, set up a meeting between Jim and I at the Phoenix airport, and Jim and I spent a whole day going through all this and comparing notes. And I wanted to set him on the right path. I had conversations with Vance Davis, formerly of the NSA. And, you know, Vance was very knowledgeable about this stuff. And Vance told me that everything that I told him, he knew another side of this story. So, you know, I didn't grow up knowing much of this stuff, except we did get the Secret Service or FBI visits to do the security checks. That happened quite a bit, every 6 months. The last time I had my security check was when I was living in an athletic dorm on the campus of the University of Denver, and they simply just showed up, these guys in suits, and you can imagine how embarrassed I was. And I threw them out, said never to come back. I think by that time I was about 21, 22. And that was the last time I ever saw the spooks. So this kind of is ingrained into me to some degree in terms of, in terms of the alien issue. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that aliens are real, although I do think alien life more than likely exists out there in the cosmos. The universe is too big to say that it doesn't exist. But in terms of are they running around on this planet, I know a lot of people like Nick Pope believe that, and they may have a lot better information than I do. I just don't see the evidence for it. But at the end of the day, would it really surprise me if that were true? No, it would not surprise me. I can tell you a lot of the technology that we got came from these Germans, and I can tell you that technology was integrated fairly quickly. And we also, you know, let me take a minute and digress, too. My father shared this with me, and I thought this was interesting. Tesla had a way, as we know, of delivering free energy. And he demonstrated that concept on New Year's Eve of 1899 when he sent energy from Colorado Springs to a home in Denver, 80 miles away, and lit up the entire house without using wires. And it's kind of like our cell phone technology. You just need a repeater somewhere along the way. He was the darling of the jet set, the Westinghouses and so forth. And until he made the fatal error of suggesting that we could provide free electricity for every American. Well, that's not what people like J.P. Morgan or Westinghouse wanted. They wanted to put a meter on it, so he was ostracized. Well, Tesla went to work for the U.S. Navy after the jet set ditched him, and he developed radar, sonar, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But what's interesting is his work was done along the lines of what today we call quantum physics. At that time, they called it hyperdimensional physics. And it was a different kind of physics than the three-dimensional physics that we're teaching in most schools. And only in the last 15 or so years are we seeing hyperdimensional or quantum physics being taught to students in our universities. This was done on purpose. Following World War II and the revelation of these new science developments by the Nazi-captured scientists, what we decided to do as a government was to bury the one kind of physics and keep the country on the path of what we typically call Newtonian physics. The physics that allows a craft to vertically lift off and achieve escape velocity without the use of booster rockets is along these lines. And would I be surprised if we're traveling out among the stars, if we've already been to Mars and the nearby planets, or even beyond that? I would not. I would not be the least bit surprised, and that belief comes from the conversations I had with my own father. So this stuff has been obscured from the public view, and I think it's really important that we surface this because there's a science of wonders out there that, if unleashed, could rescue all economies of the world, and we'd be all living the lives of kings and queens, but it's being withheld from us on purpose. And I believe what we will see is you have a post-collapse America, followed by a World War III, then a planetary unification. Here comes transhumanism, and I believe in the transhumanism period is when we'll see the widespread surfacing of this kind of technology and science. The only problem is, guys, is about 90% of us aren't going to be around to witness it.
Well, if they get if their plan goes to, if their plan, goes to fruition, we won't be. We're still, I think, Dave, at a point where it's not too far gone, and I think it's bad, but you see things like McDonald's and all these major, agri businesses that sell food are really taking away a lot of their chemicals. They're going to natural stuff. It's because people have risen up, and had their voice heard. I think there's still time for us to still do that, but that time is slipping away rather quickly. And I think the powers that be realize, Dave, that there is an awakening, that there are people waking up, and I think they have to accelerate their plan, because of that. What do you say about that?
Well, I agree, guys. And on this note, I'm going to have to depart here in just a moment. But I believe Jade Helm came out of left field, and it even caught special operations people off guard because it's such a deviation from regular continuity of government programs. So I do believe the elite hastened Jade Helm into action because of the fear that we're waking too many people up. And I'll finish with this. There's a group out there, a social psychological research group called SNARC, and they say that for an idea to become a fad, to become a trend, to spread like wildfire, it takes about 10% of the population to fully embrace this. I think we're at the 10% figure because I'm seeing evidence that mainstream media, in a lot of circles who invite me on their shows, and that people who've been asleep are coming into a sense of awareness and being awakened. In April, for example, guys, and I'm not bragging, I'm just using this to illustrate my point, I had 631,000 absolutely new visitors to my website in the month of April. People had never been there. That was followed the following month in May, where I had 587,000 people visit my website for the very first time. those are phenomenal figures, because what we're looking at is we're tapping into the people that watch Wolf Blitzer and Fox and Friends and think that's the gospel, and now they're starting to realize they've been lied to, and they're looking for alternative sources of information. We have a great opportunity right now through shows like yours that I believe that we might have a chance to turn this around through raising the level of awareness.
Dave, I got to agree, and I it's unfortunately it comes with a price, and that is things have to get bad enough that people will wake up out of that matrix. But I think you're right. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Dave. We love it when you come on, and yeah, you really kind of had your finger on the pulse of this Jade Helm 15 since it really started, and we always love getting your take on it. So thanks once again for joining us, and we know you're a busy man, so thanks, and we'll let you know.
You want to give your website out one more time, Dave, before you go?
Yeah, thecommonsensshow.com, and catch my special guest on Water in California this Sunday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, and you can listen to it by going to the website. Guys, thanks so much. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Dave. Be safe.